You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Supplemental. Dr. Erin Macdonald.
Welcome to Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Charlene Schmidt.
And I'm Marina Kravchuk.
Marina, you're back! And in fact, we are going to start off the show with an important announcement, that being that you are officially the new co-host of Mission Log Prodigy. Welcome! So glad that you can be here. Just for those who do not know, Norm has too much of a good thing going on. He's doing genealogy as well as Mission Log, the flagship podcast on our network. And among other things, Mission Log Live is going again. And he decided to take a step back from Prodigy. We're definitely going to miss him here, but that opened the door for you to come in. And I'm so excited to be working on the show with you as we eagerly await news about season 2. We had a great time doing the interview with Bonnie Gordon a couple of months ago. And going forward, we're going to have so much good stuff to come for Prodigy. But in the meantime, for those who might not know about you, let's learn about you. How did you get into Star Trek?
Very randomly, actually. My family immigrated to United States in the summer of 1998, and I was quite literally just flipping through the channels, and I found Star Trek. So nobody introduced me to it. Nobody said, "Oh, you should check out these things," because I was already, into sciences and mathematics. It wasn't, so it's not Star Trek that kind of pushed me into that field. I was kind of already interested. I just found it, and what's more, I'm almost positive that it was original series episode. Now I cannot tell you which one. I remember I was definitely on PBS, and there were reruns. So I kind of hit the very sweet spot. This is the late 90s. We still have both DS9 and Voyager on. So the last season of DS9, and Voyager was like in season 5 roughly. And then of course there were constant reruns. So PBS would have the original series, and then once I was in college, a local student center always had TNG on, which kind of is a bit of a silly thing because they were, I don't know which channel it was. They were not showing episodes chronologically. So there was a point in time where I wasn't quite sure whether Tasha Yar was actually dead or not, because
oh my gosh,
or she wasn't. So until I actually watched the entire thing, as a proper series, I didn't realize that she was dead. So, go figure. So it kind of got to this almost sort of like I reached the point of no return by watching. It's like, oh, I'm watching this one. Oh, and I caught there's this one. Are they the same thing? No, they're different. So like watching bits and pieces, it kind of accumulated to this sort of like critical mass where I was like, well, I need to know. I need to know what came before and where's all of this is going. So it's like, being bombarded from all sides, and I just sort of like sunk into the fandom. And I was an armchair fan for a very long time. So like I did not discover this whole fandom thing in terms of, online wasn't there yet. I think we were at still MySpace in terms of online.
Mid-2000s?
Well, yeah, so certainly I had no idea about the boards or anything else that was happening electronically. But I also didn't know about conventions. I mean, I heard about them. I was aware that such a thing exists. I just didn't know what a developed culture of conventions already existed by that point. So in that regards, I figured like 10 years, roughly from like 98 to 2009, I was sort of like, oh, yeah, I was subscribed to the Communicator. I was eventually, once I got online, I had my Facebook when it was still a collegiate thing, and I didn't really know any other Trekkies. That part also, it kind of started with as Facebook developed, groups appeared, and then I actually found my way to a first convention, which is a local small convention here in New Jersey, one of Creation's Northeast conventions, and it was like being struck by lightning. It was like, I only went for like 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, and end of Sunday was sort of like, I don't know what happened to me. I need to know when the next one is because I found my people. This was just an extraordinary experience.
Yeah.
And specifically, I went because, Kate Mulgrew was one of two people who were headlining. The other one was Leonard Nimoy. So it was a spectacular weekend of just being completely blown, mind blown, and completely I mean, I have, first time I met her, I'm like, I felt like my brain fried. I actually did not remember the experience itself entirely. It was sort of like I just shook hands with her and then I completely blacked out. So
I feel that. My
yeah, so
experience was a photo op. So I had all of about 10 seconds to say something. So I had
yeah.
in my mind rehearsed this thing that I wanted to say, and I just like blurted it out as fast as I could. So I wasn't going to get rushed off by the photographer. And she just smiles and nods because she's heard it all before. And then off I go. And I don't remember a word I said because I blacked out.
Yeah, no, I just literally I found myself standing in the corridor and what did just happen? Just like thinking to myself, like my hands are shaking. I remember we shook hands, but was I looking in the camera or was I staring at her? I mean, I guess I will see when I get the picture back. Did I say thank you? I don't know. So basically I've had this roughly a 10-year period where I was like, I found it, I fell in love with it. I kind of followed along, bought all the, books and read the magazines and and checked it all out. Once, especially I got online. I was like, oh, everybody has websites, and follow Bob Picardo, and
Yes.
and then yeah, and in 2009 when that first convention experience, and then after that, it's been basically. I don't know, an embarrassment of riches, especially because we kind of hit this critical moment where especially all the big conventions became super big. Everything exploded. I mean, look at New York Comic Con. It's now a complete monster.
Yeah.
And yes, I usually like now conventions are a very big part of my existence. I usually go to anywhere between 8 to 10 a year.
Wow. And not just in your
And it's
local
just
area either,
nonstop. I don't
right?
know
You're
what I
going
do
all
without Star
over.
Trek. Yeah. No, it is not like as crazy as some people think I do. As a majority of conventions are still local enough that I can just drive to them or take a train. But
Hmm.
usually about I don't know, maybe 3, 4. It'll be like I try to arrange so I can fly in at least for a day, especially like Comic Cons. I do like an in and out, fly in on Friday night, do the insane Saturday at the convention, and then fly out back on Sunday, which is fun. It's a great way to check out different events. Sometimes this is one of those things where people don't realize how much Discovery and everything that followed helped. A lot of Comic Cons became very, very Star Trek friendly. So you see more people in cosplay, you see more collectibles, you see panels dedicated to it. Because there was a moment right after, so like 2009, that's 2009 movie just happened.
Hmm.
I kind of noticed by going specifically to Star Trek conventions that the conventions themselves were older, if you will. The average age of a
Hmm.
Star Trek convention was way into 50s and older. And then after the Kelvin movies started, things started to kind of get younger
Skewed
and
younger.
more kids started appearing, more younger folks got involved. So we still I feel like compared to some of the other franchises where we're on a more mature side, but it is what it is. We're after all nearing 60 years at this point.
Right.
So which is, I mean, come on, Voyager's going to be 30 next year. At some point
I
they kind of
know, isn't
hit
that
me thinking, and I'm
wild?
like, how did this happen? I was 16 when I got into this whole thing.
Oh my goodness.
So most certainly
Yeah.
no longer 16, but what are you gonna do?
I
So
know the
yeah,
time just keeps flying, and I can't believe it's actually
yeah,
been that long already.
yeah.
And I know
So,
that you're a big Janeway fan,
oh
like
yes.
I am. From the Prodigy angle, like when it was announced that she was going to be in the show somehow, like what was your reaction?
Oh, I was thrilled. And the things that at that point already people are like, oh, it's just a kid show. It's not just a kid show. And what's more, there's Janeway. There cannot be too much Janeway. It's like everybody needs Janeway in their lives, let's face it. So
Absolutely,
it was
yes.
it was an absolute, I'm like, I can't wait to check out. And then once they started to release some of the promos, and it was like, this is looking more, better and better with every piece of information that they reveal. So it's, kudos to Hagman's. They created a masterpiece, and I really hope that we have the second season. Who knows? Miracles happen.
It could get even more.
Netflix, if you're listening to this, you have, the amazing, amazing content. Let's get going. Let's get 3, 4, 5
Yes,
and
you've
the
got
movie.
yeah, you've got devoted showmakers who love the show with tender love and care, crafted a beautiful thing for us, a devoted fan base, and we of course want more. Yeah, is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to most when we do finally know season two is upon us? Like, is there any kind of like any character, any sort of we don't know what's going on, but like
Um,
any sort of like kind of a moment, like
well,
anything generally speaking?
in terms of the general thing, I want to see how like the whole paradigm changed. They're no longer, confined to just them being a little group of kids, teenagers, by themselves with a teaching hologram. They're now part of a bigger world, specifically within a much bigger Starfleet, and of course the bigger Federation. So how does, the presentation of stories is going to change? Because we're still following along their stories, only now it's going to be within a completely different framework. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out. Like, is it going to affect storytelling style? I don't know. I'm sure it's going to be still visually gorgeous. I mean, we already saw
Oh,
the teasers. And I certainly want to see the resolution of everything with Solom. Like, so where is
yes, we
Chakotay? Is
must.
he permanently stuck in the past? Is he permanently I mean, at some point, like, I mean, is Janeway gonna find him? The actual Janeway, Vice Admiral Janeway.
Right.
So
Yes.
I don't, yeah, so th those probably two things that I'm most curious about.
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously, whether we do get further seasons or not, there will be some kind of resolution to at least that story by the end of the season, I imagine.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I agree with you on this. That's the big one is how is the dynamic going to change? One, because Gwen is off doing her thing. And
Hmm.
then two,
Yeah,
yeah, there's like a whole bunch of other people to interact with now, and it's a different situation. How are the kids coping with that? How are they thriving? I hope they are. And also,
yeah.
how is their interaction with Admiral Janeway versus hologram Janeway? That should be
Yeah.
fun.
This is something I have to say. Is something that amazes me is that, well, Kate is a great actress, but what an incredible voice actor she is. Because look at this, she's basically playing how many different versions of just Janeway. Okay, so you have the actual
Yes.
Janeway, you have the hologram Janeway, and all its her different varieties.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's the voice, and yet it's different voice. It's not Kate's her own voice.
Yes.
Obviously, it's her Janeway voice, but it's the different gradations of the Janeway voice, and it's
And she
every time
does that.
it blows my mind how she manages to do that. I
Same.
mean, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I know she's capable of doing quite miraculous things. If those you want to check out Joe Hill's Nosferatu, she did the audiobook. There's like I think 16 different voices that she does, and a lot of them are not like, oh, you just, similar characters. No, it's like going from male to female and, horrible voices, scary voices, kids' voices. I don't know. It's a gift.
It's an entirely like completely different compartment of talent
Hmm.
that's a part of acting, but
Yeah.
she can do that too. It's to a remarkable degree. So, now that we've gotten you officially introduced, how
Yeah,
about we
thank
dive
you.
into the main course of our episode today? And that is our interview with Dr. Erin Macdonald, who advises Prodigy as well as the other modern day Trek shows. Let's jump in. All right, everybody. Well, here we are. We are talking with Dr. Erin Macdonald, the science advisor for Star Trek Prodigy, among other shows. It's so exciting to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. I think most people know how much I love Prodigy, and this is just special for me to get to chat to both of you. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, well, and you're representing with a shirt right up front. So if
Yeah.
they don't know, now they know. But that's one great thing about Prodigy is everybody who works on the show genuinely loves the show, and like we see like the custom merch that you guys get, and it's just so cool. And yeah, it's fantastic. So, all right, we got to go back because this is your very first time on the show. And so we got to get you up to speed and everybody else up to speed. You're not just the science advisor to Prodigy, you started with Discovery, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I was brought
Okay,
on
how did this party get started?
It's all good. I was brought on for season 3 of Discovery was when I started in the Star Trek franchise in that role. And that was, they're jumping to the future. Michelle Paradise kind of came on and she had this idea for the season and wanted to bring in some scientists and just kind of for that one-off gig to work on that season that I worked with myself and Professor Mohammed Noor. Who
Yeah.
I'm sure you're all familiar with as well.
Oh,
Love
yeah.
him.
And we actually knew each other already independently from going to conventions and giving science talks. And so for both of us
Nice.
to get that gig completely separately was just magic and wonderful.
That's so
And
cool.
then, yeah, after season 3 of Discovery, they brought me on for all the Star Trek shows. I live in LA. I want to move into that industry. And so this was a great opportunity in both directions.
That's so cool. So, how collaborative is the process? Like, does it vary from show to show? Like, does somebody say, here's the script, let us know what you think? Or are you talking directly with the writers and the producers and directors and everybody?
Yeah, typically I work directly with the writers and the showrunners. So in the writers' room, we call it. And that will be sort of my main access point. But you're right, it's different for every show. And that mostly just depends on what flavor of science each show wants. You know, we have shows that range from Discovery, which is very science heavy, to, you know, Strange New Worlds, which is Adventure of the Week, very original series stuff where it's like, just don't explain it, we'll be fine. And then, you know, we have things like Picard, which were more modern era, so there wasn't a ton of like new Star Trek science in that. But no matter what, I touch all of the shows, and at a bare minimum, I get the scripts. And then usually if the show kind of wants more science in it, I'll get more involved as the seasons go and work with the writers and the showrunners to help refine ideas and come up with new kind of exciting adventures that we get to work on. So yeah, it's very varied, but yeah, it touches every show.
So is it, considering that it's varied because of the different nature of the shows, so how frequently do they actually reach out to you? I imagine that then Discovery people reach out to you more frequently than, say, Strange New World.
Yeah, I mean, with some of the shows, I even have a standing appointment with sitting in the writer's room. So I will pop in once a week and it will just be like, hey, I'm here. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll sit back because I also, you know, I want to move into staff writing. So that's an opportunity for me to shadow and learn and see the writers' rooms and get to know people a little bit more. And then, you know, kind of the way writers' rooms work is that they'll come up with the idea for the season, then they'll break out all the episodes, then they assign all the episodes to different writers. And so by that point, there will be the science-y episodes. I will know which writer is on those, and then we'll kind of go off and work separately on those particular episodes or plot points as they're writing it.
That's very cool. So you're an aspiring screenwriter.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, when I got the gig, and this actually ties into Prodigy as well, but when I sort of got this Star Trek job where it was basically a relatively full-time position, or at least one I wanted to focus on full-time, I was really in a crisis of like, what do I do after this job? You know, this job isn't going to last forever.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to be on a Comic-Con panel with the former Star Trek science advisors from the 90s, Naren Shankar and Andre Bermanis, and both of them moved into TV writing and then eventually executive producing and show running.
Yeah, great role models to have, just because this has happened before, and why shouldn't it happen again?
Yeah. And it's a little bit of it's like similar but different in the sense that for them, they had the opportunity to move into writing because they were on a single show that had 26 episodes, 22 to 26 episodes. And so a lot of times they'd get halfway through the season and be like, oh God, just give it to the science advisor. They can write this episode. And I'm, you know, on shows that have 10 episodes, 13 at best with Discovery, and those are all fully assigned, but I have an opportunity to work on so many shows at once, so I'm getting a huge learning experience, even if I don't get the writing credit opportunity yet.
I figure that's got to be pretty overwhelming. I mean, do you ever get a week where everybody is on you? Like, I want this, and there's this, and then how do we do that? Does it actually ever happen, or is it more spread out, seeing how, well, we get this series spread out through the year usually, or is it all at the same time for you?
Sometimes it can hit all at once, and that does get overwhelming, where I'll literally be in a call on one show, then I get an updated script, and then I get a specific question, and then I get a text from a showrunner. And like I'm pretty well organized in my brain, but sometimes I even lose track. I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. Like, you just need to remind me what this story is real quick. But everyone's super understanding of that. You know, they're very respectful and appreciative that I touch all those shows.
It sounds like a lot of what I do, which is freelance work, and it's a very feast or famine kind of a thing. Everybody wants everything all at once, or it's silence.
Yeah, totally.
Now, I have to ask, I mean, out of all the things that you have either suggested or clarified to the writers or actually, well, invented yourself, so to speak, for the purposes of the story, do you have a favorite bit, sciencey bit that you
Oh,
offered?
there are a few really good ones, kind of from each show. I've got ones that I really like. The with kind of a common thing that I'll say if we're gonna do a wacky, crazy episode off the walls, they'll be like, Erin, what do you think? And I'll be like, this is awesome. As a fan, like great. But please don't try to explain any science. Like your life is going to be much easier if we don't science it because there's really not a scientific explanation for it. And that was the attitude I had going into the musical episode of Strange New Worlds.
I wondered if that was it.
Yeah, and they basically pushed back on me for the first time ever on any show that I've worked on, where they were just like, actually, no, like we don't accept that as an answer. We need you to come up with science for this. And I was like, oh, and I mean, with good reason, right? They were like, and of course I'm in, just because it's about me and working with them to gauge what they want, and I give my recommendation, and if they want more, then we'll go with it. But yeah, really working to come up with a solid scientific explanation for the musical episode was really fun. They wanted to stay true to Star Trek, and I thought it was brilliant. And I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. I think it still sounded very Star Trek-y, which was great.
It did.
It was
did. It was very. I was actually surprised at the beginning. I'm like, this is amazing. The space sings back. It's great.
Yeah.
Now, is there any one thing that you've done on Star Trek so far that you're most proud of? Is that it?
For me, actually, it's working on Prodigy, just kind of wholesale and helping, develop the character of Rock Talk. And I don't want to take too much credit, but like, when I went in, and we can get into that story more, but like when I went in to meet the Prodigy folks and to get the primer on it, a lot of the reason I was there was like, yes, there is science. Yes, we have this idea for the protostar drive. We want to kind of help refine that and figure out the science of this. Yes, we want to figure out this, episode with the different time loop things that are going on. And so there were those little things that are the standard, problems when I go into a show for the first time where they're like, okay, these are the general episodes we're going to need help with. But then they sat down and they were like, and we also have a character that we're making that, we want to be the kid that represents kids that want to go into science.
Yes.
And so,
man.
Let's talk through your experience as a kid wanting to go into science, like your ups and downs of that journey, how you landed on astronomy, like all of that stuff. And then we kind of shaped Rock Talk out of that mold. And that's just like, that child.
I bet she was so happy. Okay, we've got to talk about Time and Muck, but this leads right into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was Rock Talk and the fact that your experiences influenced her. Can you elaborate a little bit on which parts of her are instilled in you? Or the other way around?
Yeah. I think the big thing that they liked as the writers that they kind of latched onto and we were able to put through was that trial and error. And I think Star Trek is oftentimes very guilty of this, despite people being aware. It's almost like a fun trope that you're a science officer, so you do science and all of science. And we accept that. If you know how to do biology, then you know how to do chemistry and you know how to do physics and all of this, which is not indicative of like the real life. And so I would tell stories of me wanting to maybe study biology, particularly like alien life, exobiology, and then taking biology and hating it and having really bad field experiences and just being like, I can't do this. And so taking those journeys and then discovering things like math way later in my career as something that, in my academic pursuits as something that I wanted to study more. And so with Rock Talk, we see her journey of she tries, my favorite one is when she tries meteorology.
Yes.
And like, well, these clouds indicate it's going to be a storm at this point, and the storm starts, and she's like, it's not an exact science.
A friend of mine, Katie, is a meteorologist, and that made her so happy that meteorology got acknowledged as a science on Prodigy.
Good. I'm so glad. And then too, the one where she with the space station, I think in episode 11, where they're escaping as it's exploding, and
Yes.
she does the little like
The
equation
calculation.
meme, you know?
Yes.
And her orbital dynamics and how complicated it is. But I think that journey is really true to kids, that you have these interests, and then genuinely one bad experience can put you off that science wholesale,
Yeah.
you know? And so
Like
she's like, they,
biology.
Yeah.
right, they miss that. They miss the protostar coming in to rescue them because she didn't calculate the explosion thrust of the space station. And she kind of was like, that's too hard. Like, I don't like that there's that many variables. And I think that's very true to life. You know, and something that you don't want kids to be turned off of science totally by one bad experience, but maybe recognize, nah, maybe this field isn't really my thing, but I'll keep looking.
Sure. I mean, there's how many hundreds of sciences out there? And
Yeah.
there's, if one doesn't work quite well, there's plenty of others to choose from. And you mentioned math kind of coming into your vernacular a little later. About what time did you start realizing, hey, I like this?
It wasn't until I was halfway through my college degree. So I
Oh, no
was,
kidding.
yeah, like
Wow.
I was okay at math. I wasn't a savant, but I didn't hate it. It was more a means to an end. Like I knew if I wanted to study these fields, and especially by that time I had already kind of chosen astrophysics, I knew I had to do math, but it was just a necessary evil in my mind that like, okay, I'll just keep taking these classes and keep taking these classes and I'll keep studying so I can do all this physics stuff. And then I was in Calc 3 and the teacher just kind of explained the stuff that we were doing and how it physically related to the real world. But this is Calc 3, right? This is not a physics class. It has nothing to do with natural sciences. And just it like all came together. And it was like I could finally speak the language of math, you know, and see its application.
I have to admit something because my Calc 3 made me want to major in math. And because same thing, the professor, the way he was explaining, I'm like, this is just beautiful. And it not only makes sense, but it makes sense beautifully. And I ended up majoring in statistics and mathematics, in the end.
Also
But
because of Calc 3.
Yeah, but for me, it started a little bit early because I was fascinated with statistics by the time I was almost finishing high school. So I was starting actually, Calc 3 was my first college class because I placed that high. But it just kind of made like an extra little switch click. And I'm like, oh gosh, that is amazing. So, and then of course, which followed by Calculus 4, which almost killed it. So, but that's like a whole other stuff.
But you had the bug. And I think the way I compare it is that learning math the way we do these days is it's like you're learning a language, which we've all mostly had to do at some point. But just imagine that you spend the first 10 years of learning a language memorizing words and conjugating verbs, and you never use a sentence until like 10 years in. And I feel like that's how we teach math. It's like, here's what exponential things are. Here's what imaginary numbers are. Here's what, linear equations are. And you're just drilled into all these things and you never actually use it properly until, for 10 years in. And you should be able, there is a lot of stuff you can do earlier. And so that's why I feel so many people don't appreciate math if they ever get to that point of,
And the thing is that because it is the language of science, like you don't have to necessarily do pure math. Not everybody's actually can handle pure math, but as an application to something else, which kind of leads me into how did astrophysics specifically, how did physics happen for you? At what point you're like, okay, I really want to do physics out of all the sciences?
Weirdly. And again, it's like with Rock Talk, there's a randomness to life that I think we all appreciate. And for me, I was also a dancer growing up. And so I did tap dance and Irish dance from the age of 4. And so all the way through high school. And then in high school, I was in our dance team that we had at the point, and we got a new teacher this like my sophomore year or something. I did not get along with her. And so I quit. I was like, I'm already doing dance outside of school anyway. So I quit that and I was looking for classes and the physics class had availability and the teacher was kind of cute.
That
And
helps.
I was a teenager. It's what we make decisions sometimes that way.
Mhm.
And so I signed up for the class and I ended up just really fascinated by it, to be honest. I always loved space. I always wanted to do something with space, but I didn't really even know what physics was until I took that class, and I just really enjoyed it and I learned a lot. And yeah, it was just cool and fascinating. And then finding out that astrophysics is like where you can use all this interesting physics stuff and then just use that to describe all the kablooey space stuff that we get to see. Like, that was really cool. So for me, that's kind of a full path that I went down from that point.
That is so cool. Speaking of scientists, you credit Catherine Janeway as one of your biggest influences for pursuing a career in the sciences, and you even mention her in your dissertation. I gotta know, how did she influence you?
Yeah, I didn't discover Star Trek until I was in college. And my joke that I know Marina's heard a million times, but like the Venn diagram of physics majors and Star Trek fans has a very big intersection. And so when I was in my physics courses, we would have parties and the fun thing to do would be put on Star Trek episodes and like make a drinking game out of it. Or, other, mature
That's
things that we
perfect.
do at that age. And of course, the minute I say, "Oh, I've never seen Star Trek," it's like, woof. Okay. Which episode are we putting on? Is it going to be Measure of a Man, or is it going to be Darmok, or is it going to be original series?
Which one was it? We got to know.
Yeah.
Measure of a Man. That was the first one they made.
Hey.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, they chose wisely. Yeah, that was correct.
That was good.
Thank you,
yeah.
past fellow degree fans. But yeah, so I got into Star Trek in college, loved it. The 2009 Kelvin film came out the night we all graduated, so I got a great experience
cool.
of like fandom with that. It was just like, oh, my people, this is my place. And then right after that, like 2 weeks after we graduated, I moved overseas to go to graduate school. And totally alone, didn't know anyone, didn't have any connections. But I'm high on Star Trek at this point. And so I just started watching everything, and Voyager was like it for me. Janeway was just the type of person I wanted to be. And then, of course, now I'm in a graduate school of physicists. And so at the very least, my icebreaker is like, well, I'm like watching a bunch of Star Trek right now. And then you start to find all the Star Trek fans. And, one of the women who became one of my best friends in grad school, we connected for the first time over Voyager because she was studying physics engineering. And she was all about B'Elanna Torres, and I was all about Janeway, and we really bonded over that. Yeah.
It's like those two characters in the second episode, Parallax. War particles!
War particles!
That's so cool. I was wondering if Star Trek helped you make friends in a brand new place, and there's the answer.
Absolutely. And then just the wider thing of why she ended up getting shouted out in my thesis was because, I didn't necessarily go into my PhD wanting to become a professor or having a career plan. I just enjoyed the research and I wanted to keep going down that path. And there were a lot of times where I was like, why am I putting myself through this? Like, this is so hard. And I'm not using this as a means to an end. And I would watch Voyager, and Janeway was just so cool that she was like a mentor. That I would watch her and just be like, I can't let her down, And so I gotta keep going. And then that's how I, put a big acknowledgement in my thesis of Captain Janeway for getting me through this degree.
I know that you've told the story about how you actually got Kate to sign you a copy of your dissertation. Do you remember which convention this was? How did the experience go? Did you say anything?
Yeah, it was in Denver, and I had now left. It was Denver Comic-Con, which I don't think exists anymore. But
I think they changed to Fan Expo. I think it's Fan Expo Denver now.
Got it. But this was back when it was Denver Comic-Con, and I was out of academia at this point. I wasn't working in Star Trek, but I was going to a lot of conventions and giving my science talks. And so I was there as a speaker, and she just happened to be the same one, which I had been looking for a long time.
I bet.
And I brought my dissertation with me to the convention, and I was just like, I hope her signing times and my speaking schedule line up so I can actually go and get this signed. And I stood in line and just shaking like a leaf. I really hadn't met at that point hardly any people associated with Star Trek. And that was just such a great opportunity. And, she's kind of signing things, and she's wonderful and gracious and such a nice human. And I kind of just like plopped this thesis down in front of her. And I've met her 3 times, and I never remember how it goes because I kind of black out from nerves.
I empathize.
So, but I remember vaguely, it was kind of like, this is my PhD, and pointed to the Captain Janeway thing, and I was like, sign?
Yeah.
And she kind of like flipped it over. She sees like PhD in astrophysics. She like quickly flips through it. It's all equations and graphs and all this stuff. And she was kind of like, oh my gosh. Like, she didn't know what to say, and then I didn't know what to say, and so we stood there in awkward silence, and then she signed it, and she wrote something very nice in it, and then I said, I'm going to see you later because I'm getting a photo op. And so she said, okay. And then when I then saw her again, which for people who aren't familiar, photo ops are just cattle runs. Like, they're in and out, in and out, in and out. You don't get a chance to actually chat with them. But she remembered me, and she put her arm around me, and she just said, I'm really proud of you.
Oh,
I love this. I love this so
that
much.
had to have made your heart melt.
It came leaking out of my eyes. I
mean, seriously,
weeping in a corner. Yeah.
Meeting Kate Mulgrew will do that to you anyway.
Yeah,
but to hear her say those words, oh man. I mean, that's such a cool story. You put this big document down and said, you'd help me do this. And she looks at it and doesn't know, but she's proud of you.
Yeah.
Without that influence, where in the world do you think your career might have gone? Any ideas?
Oh man, I can't even think. Everything in my life, I've given a lot of career talks, obviously, on like how I got to where I am, and going back and looking at the influences, and it's ridiculous in a fun way, but still ridiculous how many times I've been influenced by pop culture to make major life decisions for me, like fully accepting a government contract job because then I get to wear a pantsuit and I get a government badge like Dana Scully.
Nice.
I remember taking I remember taking chaos theory just because of Jeff Goldblum. And this is
wow, yeah,
Jurassic Park, that's right.
yeah.
Oh
And so, and even studying radio astronomy as an undergrad was because of Dr. Ellie Arroway in Contact. And fully even to my first undergrad, because I went to a separate university my freshman year and then I transferred, but I chose the University of New Mexico purely because that's where Contact was set.
Oh, wow, nice.
Only reason.
That's cool. And you're originally from Colorado, correct?
Yeah. So I ended up moving back because thankfully I had I was kind of struggling, and and I had a professor there who just said, I can tell you really want to study astronomy and astrophysics. You might not know this as a little freshman 18-year-old, but CU Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder, is one of the best astrophysics schools in the country. And if you get in-state tuition, I just gotta recommend
you might as well. Yeah. Plus, Boulder's so pretty. For the record, I love Colorado. I grew up in Wyoming, and so when you live there, you go down to Colorado and do all the fun things that you can't do in Wyoming because they aren't there. So Colorado is a second home. I love Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, that whole area.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned Scully, well, which we know you're a big fan of X-Files as well. So the so-called Scully, what we can call it Scully/Janeway effect. 90s are sadly many decades behind. I don't know where the time went. But do you feel that effect is still in effect, that people still being influenced like yourself by pop culture, either from way back then or even still now, which hopefully are?
It's tricky because we call it so for people who aren't familiar, the Scully effect is a statistically, like sociologically proven experiment that women my age who watched the X-Files growing up, if this is bonkers, if you were a medium to heavy viewer of the X-Files, which I count myself as this, you were over 50% more likely to go into a STEM field than women who did not watch it growing up. And like, that's an insane numbers. But I do think what's different, because now we've grown up and we've chosen our careers and we've gone down that path. And I think thinking about kids now, the reason it's the X-Files and not necessarily the Janeway effect is because it's hard to remember this if people didn't grow up in the 90s or early 2000s, but like appointment viewing was a thing. And there were shows that everyone watched and everyone talked about the next day. And the X-Files was one of them. It was so pervasive in our culture that we don't have really shows like that much. Maybe Stranger Things. I know like every teenager has watched Stranger Things, but
But everything is also very spread out if you think about it. Like before, we only were limited. It's like you only have that many channels to watch. Now, gazillion of streaming services. I mean, at some point, I realized I feel like I live in a hole. I'm aware of the names and the actors involved, but I can barely manage to watch even a small fraction of all of this.
We have an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah,
honestly, there's so much good media to consume. It's hard to even know where to start sometimes.
But you're not getting a single show or character shoved down your throat the way you did.
On network TV, and you're watching it at 7 p.m. every Sunday night, like we were watching X-Files every week on network TV.
Yeah. And to have so many episodes and to run for so long, so you're getting, damn near a decade of people watching this show every single night, or every single week. And so, I think we don't really have that anymore. And I don't know if there is like a strong character that can be that focal point. Now, all of that being said, however, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I was a little white cis girl who had red hair who's watching Scully, and so I highly identified with her. But now we have an embarrassment of riches of shows, but we also are starting to get riches in the diversity and the representation. So even though I identified with Scully, now there are so many shows where kids can see themselves in these characters. And I think so you're not going to get a Scully effect as a singular point, but you're getting a much more broader touch point for everyone.
That's a really good point to make, because I think those role model characters are out there. It's just not nearly as collective an experience as we had in our generation when there were fewer choices. And just more millions of people at the same time watching and reacting to the same things. Now we get to pick and choose all sorts of things from any time frame, from as far back as the 50s to now. That's a lot of TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how about we talk about some Star Trek Prodigy?
Yeah.
We've just barely scratched the surface. So, okay. Prodigy is definitely like, I don't know, like a special project just because it is geared towards children and families. Can you speak more about, like, specifically anything that you really contributed to Prodigy that you really love besides Rock Talk?
Well, I'll keep it more broad and then I can give some more specifics. But, for me telling the whole Janeway story, the first time I found out that Kate Mulgrew was coming back as Captain Janeway and that I would help write lines for her as their mentor and teacher and explainer, that is like, because of course we all know there's the actor and then there's the character. And for me, of course, Kate Mulgrew holds such a presence, but the character is the one that I love and worship.
Yeah, same.
And really, that was kind of my turning point, in addition to that Comic-Con panel of like figuring out what I wanted to do, but then realizing the character of Rock Talk and then getting to write for Janeway. That was like, oh, that's what I meant to be doing with my whole life. Like I've chased all these characters, right? My whole life trying to figure out what I want to do. Now I'm realizing I'm meant to write those characters and like help create these characters that inspire people. And so that was like just personally life-changing for me to have that revelation. And so, being able to edit, write, even just slightly tweak words that then I hear Captain Janeway say, it's like life came totally full circle for me in the best
That's
way.
wicked cool.
Yeah. But in terms of like more specific stories of like Prodigy and the stuff that I love and I'm super proud of, I talked about that orbital dynamics episode, and then Rock Talk does all the equations in her mind, and I got to write out all of those and send those to people. And, so that one was really fun. We had oh gosh, our scoundrel, I want to say Hokona.
Yes.
Is it
Yeah, it was Okona.
Yeah, Kona.
Okay.
Okona.
Oh God. Thinking because there's also a scoundrel in Star Wars with the same name.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, the Hakona episode where they were like trying to escape and they find the green tubes that he has, and it's basically, the fuel accelerant. And in the script, I think it was just they find these green tubes and then they said some techno babble. And I was like, dude, like that's like an actual explosive that is green. And when you light it, it's highly explosive. And so we were able to put that exact science into there. So that was kind of cool. And yeah, it's just been such a fun experience. And the show has really embraced and been so open to the science that it's been a great experience for me with that.
And it sounds like you get to not just do science stuff, but you could have little character things, like the way a character says something and the way something is phrased. I know you can't speak on specifics in season 2, not yet. We'd love to have you back for that when the time finally comes. Yeah, we are so eagerly awaiting. But in season 2, are there any things that you're looking forward to that you had a hand in that you know are coming? Like blink once for yes, blink 2 for no.
Yes. And I think, but again, it's the broader conversation of Prodigy, because it was, all of the shows, again, they all welcome my help, but there's definitely the levels of like, you're the science advisor or like you were one of us. And I think Prodigy was very much like, this is a collective effort and your input is valued and welcome and we appreciate you and what you do. And so being able to really step in at points and say, can I have a go at this? And especially as an aspiring writer, and like, can I really dig in a little bit more than maybe would technically be the science advisor's role? And for them to embrace that and give me that learning opportunity just has been wonderful. And that's both for season 1 and season 2. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot to look forward to, and I really want it to come out.
Oh gosh, I cannot wait. I'm literally every day I'm checking the news to see like maybe there's an announcement. That's when it's going to air, and so far nothing.
Yeah, we're chomping at the bit just as much as I'm sure you all are to talk about it. And we cannot wait to have everybody come on the show so we can talk to all of you again about all the things that we don't even know about yet. So exciting. 100%. So, okay, how about we talk about Time Amok? Because I'm curious about how collaborative this process really is. And so with that being such a big concept that you had to break down, it's like the pinnacle of what you do as a science communicator. You take down this really complex concept and break it down so that anybody can understand it. Can you walk us through how that went and like, who are you talking to? How does it go? And we've only got like 4 hours to do it. So,
well, I mean, I do want to give full credit to the writer of that episode, who's Nikhil. He came up with the idea. I came in pretty late into the writing process of Prodigy. It just timing wise, like when they brought me on as the science advisor for the franchise, season 1 had kind of, at least the first half, was pretty much kind of beat out, if not totally written. And so so the concept of time amok and most of the script had basically already been written by Nikhil. And it was genius. It was freaking brilliant. Like, it was so good. Where I think, first of all, it was a delight to read a script and see a sine wave in it. I'm sure you've heard the story, but this is seriously, of all the science fiction I've ever seen, written, touched, it is the first time I've ever seen a graph in a script at all to explain something.
That's not very common, I imagine.
No.
Yeah. But I think where I was able to kind of come in was go, oh, that's a damped sine wave. And then we're like, oh, that's okay. Because the whole idea was that you're close to it, it's high and then slow and then high and fast and then slow. And then it dissipated the further they got away, which was a damped sine wave. So they had illustrated what it looked like as that graph, but then putting the technical language in to describe it, which then again, that's something that Janeway says. And then actually too, working on the visuals for that episode, I remember getting pulled in for the not post-production, the animation, animatics, to figure out how to visually convey it, because like with an episode like that, which is highly complex and mostly an emotional character story, you really want the kids to know what's going on. And that's really hard to do for a complex episode like this. So not only did we have our sine wave literally on the screen, Janeway explains what's going on. The characters reiterate it multiple times. They showed the ship, time passing in a lateral frame as well. And so all of those are like those teaching techniques of like, keep explaining it different ways because one is going to click for different people. And so, so we worked on that visually as well as in the dialogue. And the feedback was great, that kids were able to really pick it up and follow along with that episode. And I love it. I just think it stands out as one of the best sort of fractured time episodes.
Yeah, and just generally, it kind of illustrates precisely why it's beautiful Star Trek, and what's more, it's not limited just for kids.
Yeah.
This is fantastic and fantastically accessible to regardless what your age is. I mean, whoever's watching it who doesn't know what a damn sine wave is, here you go, you're having an explanation right there multiple times.
Yeah.
Now, seeing how Prodigy found itself in this strange situation last year with the cancellation and sudden disappearance, basically, and I'm sure you are aware of the Save the Prodigy, hashtag that was going everywhere, which finally was crowned by I think it is a crowning achievement for the fandom, the fact that we launched the the plane that was flying all over the Los Angeles. So your thoughts and feelings, not so much about the cancellation, but the fact that the fandom actually managed to pull something akin BJ Trimble's 60s feat with getting Star Trek renewed for third season, the original Star Trek.
Yeah, it makes me really emotional because for a long time, like, Prodigy felt like there's lots of poor phrases for it. I'll use one that's a little more self-deprecating, but the redheaded stepchild of the Star Treks as they were coming out. It wasn't advertised as much. It was on this new platform that like kids really weren't watching a bunch of. Like, their go-to was not Paramount Plus to watch kids shows. And it didn't get, the sort of press and coverage and push that the other Star Trek shows did. And, I think particularly with like Strange New Worlds coming out kind of around the same, it's all blurred. I just lost track of time totally. It was sort of around the same time.
It's roughly, yeah. Yeah.
And it just being completely overshadowed. And I felt like all of us who worked on it and then all the people who fell in love with it were like screaming from the rooftops, like, this show is so good. And as Star Trek fans, I think a lot of people didn't really give it a chance, in the sense that I feel it was very smartly written to be a very high action, high octane opening 2 episodes that felt very Star Wars-y, because that's what a similar show that age group would be watching. So you want to give them something that they relate to. And then I would always tell people, like, just stick through 1 and 2 if you feel it's too fast, too action forward, because episode 3 is like, boom, sucker, you're watching Star Trek. We're
Right?
stuck in the gravity well of a binary star system. Like, we gotta figure out how to escape from it. And so I do think like word spread in a glorious way that we really don't get to see that much. And then just to have that rug ripped out from under us as it's starting to gain traction and people are getting their kids to watch it. Because the other thing too is like kids that age, you know, they're not going to rewatch the same 10 episodes over and over again. They're going to rewatch shows that have 100, 200 episodes over and over and over again. And so Prodigy just didn't have enough content for kids to keep going back to it. And so it was just a lot of things working against it. But then that heart and that love was there. And so when that rug got pulled out from us, I mean, that was like, you know, this industry is devastating. You go into it ready to be heartbroken. And I just remember, like, I let myself love. Like, I opened my heart to this show and it's broken my heart. And yeah, you know, I have a drawing behind me that my friend did when that show disappeared. Because also, I mean, we'll talk about me appearing in it, but
We must.
she made the painting of me and Rock Talk hanging out at Starfleet Academy.
Oh,
That
And
is
it's
so
my
sweet.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's really
how
sweet.
about we jump into that? Because you did have the unique honor, not just of working on Star Trek, but actually being a character on screen as yourself. And then you got the name
And
drop
also be
before
mentioned.
that.
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Erin said we can't do that. That's one of my favorite lines in all of Lower Decks, which, and there's so many of them, but that was so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta know, like, how did you find out that those things were happening? But then also, what was your reaction? Because that had to have been surreal.
Well, Lower Decks happened first. So how about we
Yeah.
talk
So-
about that one?
Yeah, so Lower Decks happened first. And that was a surprise for me, not when it aired, but like as it was nearing, because that wasn't a scripted line at all. But I was
Oh.
working super closely with the writers for that season finale, that episode. It was a season 2 finale. It's a super sciencey episode, all that techno babble about stripping the ship, going through the asteroid, all of that stuff. It was super sciencey and it was so fun to work on. And that whole scene where they're like, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? And they give all the explanations why they can't and why they ultimately have to take out the outer hull plating. You know, we were coming up with all of those. Like, Erin, why can't they do this? Erin, why can't they do it? And so that relationship had happened. We'd written the episode, super happy with it. And then later, I think it was like at Star Trek Day or something, a bunch of the writers were all there. Some of the actors were there. And one of the producers, Brad of Lower Decks, I had known him for a while, and he came up and he was like, "Oh my God, Erin, we did something really funny in the recording booth." And then he brought Fred over, who voices Shax, and he was basically like, "You, Dr. Erin, I shouted your name." So I didn't know like totally the context of it, but they definitely gave me the heads up. And then again, it's like one of those things, if you don't know it's there, you can't hear it, but if you know it's there, you can hear it. And so yeah, for people who haven't heard it, it's where Kayshawn is like, "Why don't we warp past the debris?" And then they all shout at him. And again, I missed it the first time because I was laughing too hard at the science officer who's throwing fisticuffs at Kayshawn for saying that.
Yeah.
So it's just delight. It's a cacophony of delights. But
oh my gosh.
yeah, so that aired first, but the Dr. Erin in Prodigy had happened before all of that.
Oh, gotcha.
Right, just because of animation timeline schedule stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had talked about the scene where Rock Talk comes to discovering that she wants to study xenobiology, and talking about them being at Starfleet Academy. And it was more focused on like the cute story that I think most people didn't pick up on. But, you know, instead of it being exobiology, it's xenobiology, which are linguistically fairly the same thing. But the reason we chose xenobiology is because it's X, which is why she hasn't got that far down the alphabetical list of sciences yet. So that's why she went for xenobiology. But yeah, they wanted her to to have a science officer note how good she was with Murph and suggest that as she's going through the list of sciences. And again, that all kind of got pared down, but so graciously and kindly, the Hagemans said that, well, she has to meet Dr. Erin. So let's see if we can make that happen.
It's the sweetest.
I hope you'll get a chance to write Dr. Erin in future scripts. Get the best of every single possible world you possibly can through Star Trek.
Extra meta, just all the way through.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Tawny Newsom is writing the Starfleet Academy show right now. We've had other science writers write episodes. This is just the next level.
Exactly. And, it is one of those, like I said, too, the industry will break you. And so you try not to get your hopes up too much for anything. And so I really was holding it at arm's length and just keeping it secret and not even letting myself get excited because it was such a short scene. And of course, costs go up, time goes up, and it's like this could so easily get cut. It could so easily get cut.
I am just so glad that it didn't because it was such a perfect moment. I was like no, it is.
Right? Like those of us who know who that is are like, oh, that's Dr. Erin. We're geeking out about you.
Yeah, right. Well, and the fun trivia thing for that too is that the only two people to ever play themselves on Star Trek are myself and Stephen Hawking.
Dr. Hawking,
Yeah.
That is just perfect. I can't.
Yeah.
Now, in your headcanon, have you written her backstory or is she just you?
No, it's me, obviously. There's fan theories that go around because then they also put Dr. Erin into Star Trek Online.
Oh,
that's right. Yes. I forgot about that. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, I was a science officer for Captain Harry Kim in Star Trek Online. And there's a lot of theories. There's two I really like. One is that I have a time travel future ahead of me, a la Dr. Gillian Jacobs from Voyage Home.
Nice.
I just get aboard a starship one day and go into the future.
The whales.
Yep, exactly. And the other one though is that I'm a Q. I don't hate that, I gotta say.
Story possibilities there.
Absolutely. Now, something I saw I believe on Twitter some time ago, somebody called you the Julia Child of science, which I think is a perfect description.
That's awesome.
Now, she's obviously famous for making culinary arts accessible to general public, people who have never cooked. And you're amazing at making science accessible through pop culture to, again, general public that doesn't know what a damn sine wave is, or anything else for that matter. Now, I know that a lot of scientists who are good scientists are not necessarily good science communicators. So in your case, have you always had this ability to explain so clearly, to like this, desire to teach people, to explain things?
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. And I mean, that comparison, I put it on like all my bios. As soon as someone made that comparison, I was like, I'll take it. That's good. That's great. I love Julia Child. I just idolize her again as like you said, a communicator. And for me, I've always loved being in front of audiences. That was something as a young kid, my parents tell the funny stories of me just being like, I like microphones and I want to stand up in front of people. And so I was never afraid of being in front of an audience. And then as I went through academia, I did fall in love with teaching. Just genuinely, I love teaching introductory courses. But science communication is a skill, and finding those touch points and learning how to explain things to people is a learned thing that you have to constantly work on. And I'm glad you said, that there are great scientists and then there are great science communicators, and the two don't always meet. And the biggest skill I got for that was working in a science museum. It's a part-time job, but I already had my PhD in astrophysics at this point, and they basically were like, just go in the space area and like that's your domain and just hang out there and do shows and demonstrations and talk to people. And so I would spend all day, 4 days a week, fielding questions from a 4-year-old who's obsessed with black holes to like a retired aerospace engineer. And I got comfortable saying, that's a great question. I actually don't know the answer. Let's look it up together. And then, realizing when I've lost an audience and need to rephrase something, when you see the look in their eyes where you're like, whoop, nope, okay, let's rewind.
Go back.
Yeah. And how to rephrase things and come up with multiple examples for people when one isn't working. All of those are skills that you learn over time. And, one of the things too is I really did always want to, I would see people like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson and say like, that's the type of thing I think I would like doing. But also learning how to have a stage presence and learning how to be more interactive with people. I took theater classes when I was a postdoc because I just had been so embedded in the science world for so long and hadn't been exposed to the general public, for lack of a better word, that I was like, this is something I need to do. I can't dance anymore. They don't have adult classes for people who were on the verge of professional dancing. And so I took theater classes, and I do think that helped me a lot to work and play with people and read body language and all of that.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. Working with the general public is a huge life experience I think everybody needs to have, no matter what sort of profession you want to go in. Being able to talk to anybody and everybody at any time, that's in itself a great skill.
Yeah, it really is.
I never realized how difficult it was to explain even the simplest concept until somebody asked me that when I was interviewing for jobs after out of college. Somebody said like, well, explain what this is. And I was like, I can recite the definition out of textbook. I'm not sure if I can actually explain it in common words. And that was a horrifying realization that that's not exactly an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So you've done wonderful. Well, first of all, you had the Science of Sci-Fi audiobook, which is one of my favorite things. But you also had several shows on YouTube. One was also one of my favorites, Astronomy 101. Do you think you're going to do something else in a similar format, whether an audiobook or perhaps go back to like a YouTube series type of thing? Or is that something that has to be in the back burner because you do want to write more?
There's too much stuff. There's too much stuff. No, actually, it's funny you mention that because I am starting to bring out YouTube videos again in more condensed forms. Because the ones I put online, if you go and look at like the Astronomy 101, those were middle of quarantine, long lectures, basically, that were just like, hey, we're all stuck at home. Who wants to learn?
It saved my sanity. One of the things that saved my sanity. So thank you for that.
Yes, I love them too. I learned so much.
Oh, that means so much. Like, I really enjoyed doing it. And it was at such a weird point, I think, in all of our lives. And I just remember sitting in this room, just like being like, okay, this is what planets are, and everyone's just responding in texts. And so I'm glad I put them up because people still find them. And people are welcome to check them out. It's a full semester worth of astronomy.
It was better than the actual semester of astronomy I took in college. Like, I really got good stuff out of it. I don't remember anything I took 20 years ago. Sorry, professor.
Yeah, right.
But the algorithm just reminded me of those videos, as well as the clips of the Science of Star Trek that aired with Prodigy and stuff like that. I'm like, these are so good. These need to be more of a thing. So I'm thrilled to hear that more stuff is coming. Yay.
They're just my little janky at home YouTube videos. I don't have the production budget that the Star Trek franchise does but I will say, if anyone had slept on those, definitely just look up the Science of Star Trek Prodigy. Because we came out with 5 videos that were for the back half of season 1, and they actually won awards. I have a trophy now.
Yay!
Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It won the bronze in the worldwide global ProMax marketing campaign for educational videos.
Awesome.
So
Fantastic.
Just a bronze, but I'm still pretty proud of that.
Hey, that's still great. Way to go.
Yeah, so you can check out those. I think there's 5 videos, and then I did a generic one for Star Star Trek on the Science of Warp Drive. And again, it's like, I wish I had the editing and graphics budget that they do for my videos, but same idea. And, I could do more than just kind of more generic sci-fi stuff. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yay, good timing.
That's so cool. Yay. Well, Dr. Erin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Where can people find you online? And do you have anything upcoming that you'd like to talk about before we go?
Sure. So people can find me online at Dr. Erin Mac, DrErinMac on Instagram and on Blue Sky. I think that's pretty much all that I'm on right now. and then on YouTube, the Dr. Erin Explains the Universe will drop you there. And then in terms of other projects, I'm still working on my own stuff. I'm still working on Star Trek. And then I also, just to give a quick shout out, slightly related, but I produced a short film with Jesse Gender, who's a Star Trek commentator on YouTube, that is going to be premiering on Nebula in a few months, at some point this summer. It's in post-production right now. And I'm really proud of that. We got the wonderful John Delancey was agreed to be in it, and it's a wonderful experience. So I'm really excited for people to see that. It's called Identities. And if you follow myself or Jesse online, you will be bombarded with promos for it coming up.
Cannot wait. It looks very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very proud of it.
Right on.
But yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for focusing on Prodigy. I love it.
We love Prodigy.
So do we.
Thank
love
you.
It. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Many thanks again to Dr. Erin Macdonald for joining us. That was a blast. And before we go, we wanted to acknowledge the passing of John Trimble, who died on April 19th. And for us, that was yesterday.
John and his wife Bija will always be remembered in the Star Trek fandom for their work in the Save Star Trek Letter original writing campaign, which kept the original series on the air for its third and final season. Without that, the Star Trek universe as we know it would not be the same. Their influence is still felt in the fandom, especially in light of last year's Save the Star Trek Prodigy campaign.
That's right. Our hearts and our thoughts are with Bijo and the Trimble family this difficult time, and we grieve with you, and we in the Star Trek community owe you a great debt.
Mission Log Prodigy is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, production and technical direction by Earl Green. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. And if you'd like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog. Until next time, live logs and prosper, and go fast.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.